Well, hi to everyone. I am Durham Wong Rieger, President and CEO of the Canadian Organization for Rare Disorders. I think this is webinar 3 in our spring series leading up to the launch of Canada's rare disease drug strategy. And I think it's webinar 199 in our whole series that we've been doing since we started on this journey 2 years ago. But those of you who might have heard Bill say, we've been pushing this forward since a couple years now, really looking forward to being able to provide the right kinds of supports to get this rare disease drug strategy set up in a way that's going to be most meaningful and absolutely is going to deliver to patients. I'm going to do a slight bit of an editorial here, and I don't know if I should or not, Bill, but I will. Some of us who had the opportunities to already participate in this, I guess it's the third round of the Health Canada consultations toward the launch of this rare disease drug strategy. The first one was more or less a scoping of what people believe. The second was, okay, here's what we heard. Here's kind of, could you refine that? And the third one was the first time a presentation of a draft. And some of you who were on there with me, I'm looking at Nicola, I think we were a little bit maybe shocked, aghast, dismayed. I hope those aren't too strong of words, but I think listening to everybody that was in our session with the patient organizations, we were certainly, that was not what we expected. It was underwhelming to say the least. I think they recognize that. I think they put it out as a first foray. There are another rounds of consultations coming forward. So what we do know is we clued them back into this, and they said very clearly, they've been listening and following in on the webinars, and in a few of them they've been participating. So in reality, these are really important because it is informing where that strategy is going to go. So, we've got 3 more in this series, and then we've got the June conference on the 8th and 9th in Ottawa in person. And honestly, guys, I really hope we can get a lot of people to come out to that conference because it really will pull together everything that we've been talking about for the last 2 years, 2.5 years, towards what does this drug strategy look like, but more importantly, what does it need to look like in the context of a rare disease strategy? So as we keep saying, we can't do drugs without having a good rare disease framework. So this is really important. I looked, this is our third in the series. So next slide, Ange. This is one on the patient registries, and I won't read all of this to you except to say, we have been promoting the need for a smart drug strategy. We need a smart rare disease system and really taking advantage of, smart planning, smart technologies, and certainly the ability to be agile and to conform to new needs as they come up. So this is a critical component. I think what we also know is that a key component of any kind of a disease system and drug system are patient registries. I looked at my notes and I realized I wanted to do this webinar in 2017. So it's taken me a long time to get to this point, but I think we're in a much better position now than we were in 2017 to really pull this off. But I have a humongous number of the notes and everything that we wanted to do at the time. I think we recognize we've got to have registries if we're going to be able to do a good job in understanding the disease, having patients on board, being able to track them. So unfortunately, it does take us a while here in Canada. Next slide, Ange. So this is what we're going to have today. I am so excited because we've got a couple of really strong presentations of rare disease registries, how they actually work, how they actually do support in terms of the fundamentals of monitoring and managing patients, but also having patient communities that are in position for everything from research clinical trials to being able to monitor and to evaluate patient outcomes. We'll do just a brief presentation on what's happening with the NCATS, the NIH program there and what they've got in place. More importantly, we're going to have Pam Gavin, who's VP at NORD, who's going to present on the NORD I Am Rare platform. And then our own Canada Informed Rare, who are going to present on how they are actually piloting rare disease patient registries. And then we've got 3 panelists who I think are going to be absolutely the best position to give us some feedback on what they're hearing, talk to their own experiences in terms of the patient registries they're a part of. And hopefully what we can all talk about is where do we go next with this? We were a little bit dismayed, but maybe it was just not very much information provided to us that in the Health Canada consultations, there seemed to be some talk about we need to create a rare disease registry in Canada. And I think many of us says we don't need to really create a rare disease registry. We have rare disease registry. We need to make better use of them. We need to be able to network them better. We need to actually provide some support and funding to them to actually make them fully, functional, and to be able to talk about how do we develop them better. So it isn't a matter of being able to start from scratch. So I'm really thrilled that we've got this webinar here. Next. So this is the rest in this series that we're coming up. So Thursday will be hugely important. We'll build on this one on registries, and that is centers of excellence. As much as patient registries, we need to have rare disease centers that are going to help us in terms of being able to not only house the registries, but also provide the kinds of specialty diagnosis, access to treatments, managing, monitoring. And we will have hopefully the opportunity of hearing some examples again from abroad, from what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the US, what are the plans for a global rare disease network that we can be part of, and then really have some of the leading pediatric centers, the rare disease centers that exist in everything but a formal network with the MISRN, the Maternal Infant Children's Youth Research Network, who we hope are going to be able to provide us with the kind of support in order to make a rare disease a network. It really come to life, I think, fairly quickly here in Canada, and again, be that foundation for having optimal access to diagnosis and management of therapies. May 19th, we're going to do a Leave No One Behind, where we're going to look at some really the tough issues that have really left a lot of people behind, and hopefully be able to talk about how this rare disease strategy cannot just go down the middle and be able to address those diseases and therapies that are the most common, but really we need to include everybody. And then looking at research and development here, what do we need to do, and why is it so fundamental to having support for and funding for innovative research as part of a rare disease drug strategy? Okay, and next is the conference that's coming up June 8th and 9th. It's an in-person conference. We will have options for people to be able to network in, but honestly, gosh, the experience of being there in person is so really important. We understand some hesitancies that people still have, but I think more and more, many of us are beginning to feel like, okay, we can go out there and we need to be able to pick up again in terms of, I saw recently not a headline, a really small story somewhere, and that basically said, there's been a market decline in creativity and innovation during the pandemic because people don't come face to face, and that people don't really have the same opportunities to actually be able to create and to network and to build with each other as they do in person. So as lovely as we all are, in this two-dimensional world, we do so much better when we're able to do face-to-face. So, and all of us in healthcare know that as well. So it would be, if you're only parenting that you ever got to do, is to have to do it with, your kids through a Zoom. It works and it's better than nothing, but that is not what we call optimal. Okay, quickly then, I'm going to get to our real panelists. Why rare disease? Patient registries, these are not necessarily anything new to everybody, but first and foremost, it really is to give information back to the patients and back to the rare disease communities. I won't read through this because you'll hear some much better examples of how we use it, but what we are saying is that they are core to everything from, patient having knowledge and being able to be an informed participant in their care, all the way through to being able to stimulate research and new developments and getting communities quickly engaged in clinical trials. Next. What are the uses? These are all the areas in which we're currently using them. And I think the big statement at the end, and this is I wrote from my friend, Professor Bellegarde in Australia, can one registry system perform many or all of these roles? And the answer is absolutely yes. So I think that's the stunning part of it, right? We have registries and they are, but we have to design them to do this. And I think that's what's stunning now is that we are designing them. And we know that, in Canada as well, if we look at CF, if we look at, muscular dystrophy, if we look at what's happening in ALS, these are, registries that have been designed, but also are able to be flexible and expanded. So we can do this. And of course, you'll hear the informed rare proposal there. Okay, next. This is not to do anything except to give you a sense of what the U.S. has been doing. The National Institutes of Health under NCATS, the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, we're very compelled to saying we need patient registries. We need rare disease patient registries more than any other disease area. And they have taken it upon themselves to create a program that would help patient organizations and patient clusters to actually develop their own patient registries with, so a toolkit that takes them through the registry development process. How do they get started setting up the registry? How do they manage it, including managing the data and recruiting patients, and also being able to connect their registries with researchers. So this is a huge initiative that is still in works with NCATS, but the toolkit is available online. And I just thought it was a great example in terms of how the government in the US is actually taken on this task of helping to create patient registries. In the beginning, some of it to do natural histories, but I'm going way beyond that. But even better than this, quite frankly, are the two presentations we're going to have here from us. We're going to hear from NORD about their I Am Rare patient registry, not just their program, but their process of actually engaging patient organizations and helping them to create their patient registries, providing a platform on which they can put their registry and actually be able to have the security of, of it being used. And then we're going to hear from Inform Rare, which has created 3 pilots in which they are interesting enough also connected to the I Am Rare platform. So this will give you some much better close-up opportunities. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm actually going to turn it over to, I think we're going to start with Pam Gavin, who is the VP from National Organization for Rare Disorders, a long-term colleague of mine who is an absolutely one of the most amazing people that I know, and quite frankly, amazing not only in terms of what she does, but amazing in the sense that whenever I ask her for something, she is always ready there with information, with other kinds of support, and has been, we say it over and over again, without a NORD, there would not be a CORD. So they helped us way back when we first tried to get, the organization up on its feet. And they have continued to help us all along, and they've continued to make available their trainings and their information. Now we see also their platforms. So Pam, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thanks again a million for doing this.
Oh, it's my honor and pleasure, Jahan. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you all today and to share with you a little bit of what NORD's doing in an area that I have a great personal passion for. And as Jahan said, NORD is a sister organization to CORD, and we enjoy working together across geographical boundaries on issues of great importance to the community that we share. Next slide. So for many of you who know this already, this is NORD's mission. So as I said, we're very much aligned with CORD, and we work together on a variety of things. We are about to celebrate our 40th anniversary, and we look forward to not only celebrating the great successes of the community at large, but also look at what we should be doing in the future to help those in greatest need. Next slide. So I'm here to talk with you a little bit about the I Am Rare program, and I'm going to go very quickly over some key things that I think may be interesting for the audience, but I really want to tee it up for my colleagues in the Inform Rare team, because they're really taking our thoughts and ideas and putting it to practice where the rubber meets the road, and really the whole reason why NORD invested in this program starting probably over 10 years ago in its infancy. But the idea behind this was really to establish a system and a set of support services that over time will help patients, patient advocacy organizations, and of course their caregivers engage in research in a collaborative way with other very important stakeholders in an effort to try to accelerate drug development. I learned firsthand before the notion of a registry was ever entered in my mind or my family's mind, how isolated yet important it was to take the experiences of our loved ones and our colleagues and et cetera, to to bring them to bear so we can learn from their experiences. Next slide. So NORD set out to put together this program, and one of the things that we did early on in the first, I would say almost 2 years worth of interacting and engaging with our colleagues at NCATS and the Office of Rare Diseases there at NIH and the Office of Rare Diseases at FDA CDER, and really looking at where can NORD invest its resources where there are big gaps, where to this kind of notion of rising tides elevates all boats, if we could invest, you know, the precious resources we have into in a way that could leverage benefit the entire community. And we really focused on the lack of knowledge of rare diseases and how patient advocacy organizations, the communities that they serve, patients, individuals, families, caregivers, how they all know something and have experiences that they can contribute to accelerating drug development. So we really set out to focus on a system and support services that helped patient advocacy organizations launch registries, and registries that could support natural history studies or longitudinal observational studies. Next slide. So a little bit of our growth, slow and steady over the time frame, and we've expanded and provided support services, as Durhan said, to those who are even just starting out in their infancy as organizations or as organizations with early research plans and becoming what we often call research ready. Next slide. Just to touch base on a couple of key things about our program, which has evolved over time. And as Durhan said, we're working with our colleagues at Inform Rare on our version 2 of our platform, and they'll go into greater detail about their project. But central to the program is this notion, if I mentioned earlier about multi-stakeholder, it has to support the different stakeholders, and it has to be configurable and flexible so that it doesn't restrict people to a one-size-fits-all mentality. So that means we need to be able to have different types of roles in the system, and the features and functions and capabilities need to be able to be configured to those roles, and they may vary across communities, across studies, et cetera. So in turn, we developed a very robust consenting model or module so that we can configure consents appropriately across the platform. Next slide. Similarly, the idea here in this particular slide, I'm pretty excited to say that in version 2, we started with English, and we're going to be launching the platform in the ability to choose language preferences. And in this case, we're going to start out with French and Spanish. Next slide. So here is just an example in our test environment of a survey that is presented to the user who happened to have chosen French as their primary preferred language. Of course, they can change that if they so choose. Next slide. Here's another example of a screenshot just to bring home this whole point of a multi-stakeholder system that supports different ways in which these studies and registries are designed and to be launched and implemented. And here's just an example of where you may have a curator that has a task list based upon their job description. They have to look at the activity in a particular registry and perhaps perform tasks of follow-up tasks on things that have taken place in that study. Next slide. The ability to provide graphing and data visualization in different formats is really important, and it depends on the user. A participant in a study may want to see how they compare in a de-identified manner to other participants. But also as a data analyst participating on the study team, I may have different needs and different ways to represent the data visually and graph it. Next slide. Here's just an example of robust reporting capability. We have the ability to extract data across longitudinal experience collection schedule, and not only represent it in various desktop softwares, but also analytical tools as well as presenting information on the screen, as you saw in those other graph examples. Next slide. As a manager, I may have access to a bigger dashboard with various metrics that are available for me based upon my user preferences and the data that I have the rights to see. Next slide. This particular slide, I added it here because I think, and you'll hear from our Inform Rare colleagues, governance and compliance is really, really important. As an independent entity and a trusted organization in the patient community in the United States, and an advocate for policies in the U.S. federal government, it's really, really important that we remain true to our ethics and transparent. And we want to make sure that those tools, those principles find their way into tools in the system and that they're available to those who want to use them. Next slide. We have an interesting cohort model for folks who want to take the journey with other like organizations. And we've mapped out, this is just an example of the different steps that people go through, and we support them along the way. We have templates, we have resources. In the US, we have a IRB ethics review board group that we have preferred services and pricing for organizations that have an interest in using them. But it's no restriction there. People can use whatever resources they have at their disposal. Next slide. We have a great team that I'm proud to say since the very beginning of this program that I've watched grow and evolve, and they're all people who are passionate about this work and have been involved in it in one way, shape, or another before coming to NORD. So I'm very grateful for this team. And they're very passionate about working with patient advocacy organizations in the rare space in particular. Next slide. And I think that wraps it up. I just wanted to be as brief as I possibly could and stay within time constraints, because I think our colleagues at Inform Rare will really show you why we built this program for folks like them and for the work that they want to do that we feel so passionately in support of. Thank you, Durhan.
Thank you so much, Pam. That was, as always, for you, very concise, very comprehensive, but also truly, truly, I think I should say timely. This is great. I mean, you can see what, Radar with the NIH had put forth and put out there, but then you folks pick it up and you actually provide the hands-on support. We got a couple of comments here, including one group that said, hey, they follow through with you folks in terms of setting up their registries through your IMRare, and they're really thrilled and got their first publication that same year. So goes to show you, this absolutely is a way in which we can get going. So yeah, I'm very, very pleased. We'll have opportunities for Q&A, but I'm going to turn it over now to Beth Potter with CHIO and Inform Rare. And Beth, I will have you introduce your team. I think you've brought in a cast of the leads in this project who are going to help us understand kind of what we're doing here.
Thanks so much, Durhan and Pam and everyone here. I'm delighted to be here. And I think actually that Pranish Chakraborty from the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario and John Adams from CanPKU are going to present these slides on behalf of our team, which also includes myself, and Kim Angel is also here from the Canadian MPS Society. So I'll leave it over to you, Pranish and John.
Thanks, Beth. And I think Maureen Smith is in the audience as well, I hope, as one part of our co-PI team for Inform Rare. And as Beth mentioned, John and I are going to present really on behalf of quite a large team that spans our country and involves people from many backgrounds, including patients and clinicians, but also researchers and academics. And Beth, she and I have been working together, I think it's about 20 years now, right, Beth? Trying to make these things real. So just along the theme of in-person meetings that Durhan mentioned and also came up in the chat, I was reflecting when we were preparing for this that it was in 2017 we were presenting about a precursor to Inform Rare, and I watched Marshall Summers give a presentation about the NORD plans around developing registry platforms. And so when we were starting the Inform Rare project, recalling that presentation and also the conversations with Marshall after made me reach out to him, and then we connected with the NORD IM Rare team, and I think here now we'll show you where we've gone with that, and it's been a real pleasure working with the team there. So we'll go to the next slide, and click again there. So. The project that we started with, in 2011, I think we wrote the grant as part of an emerging team grant from CIHR to establish a Canadian inherited metabolic disease research network. And we always meant to come up with a better acronym, but we stuck with CIMDERN, really quite catchy, but it's worked. And then this has evolved to Inform Rare. Now, the inherited metabolic diseases are a very large set of inherited individually rare diseases, some ultra-orphan, some less rare, but all very rare. And in the most recent sort of attempts at classifying them, there's an international classification that was published in 2021 with about 1,500 diseases. So just to get some range, scope of the range of diseases. That really cause disease by impacting on the biochemistry of the body. That's what unifies them all. For many of them, there are specific treatments. And again, just to mention that drugs are important, but there are many other modalities that are equally important and interact with the use of drugs. So nutraceuticals, stem cells, organ transplantation, bone marrow transplantation, et cetera. So I think we have to keep that in mind, that the treatment landscape is actually quite broad, and altogether can really impact on both the natural history of disease, but improving patient lives. With CIMDERN, one of the branches of research that we undertook was to perform a longitudinal data collection on a group of inherited metabolic diseases, and this was done on collecting information over a 10-year span for individuals with these diseases, children, was our focus in Canada. And it was structured as a chart abstraction method, building this longitudinal data set. And we learned many lessons there, including about methods and issues around data quality, and also sustainability of these types of efforts. And I think that's a theme that always comes up when the topic of registries is discussed. Included in that work, and MPS 1, so one of the mucopolysaccharide storage diseases, and PKU were both diseases that were included in this effort and in this project. And we worked on defining a core outcome set for PKU. And this was in partnership and with full engagement with clinicians and patient and families, as well as with policy makers. And Inform Rare is a project that was funded in 2019 to support registry-based randomized trials under the SPORE initiative, and includes PKU, the mucopolysaccharide storage diseases, so the MPS, as well as a project on SMA, where we're working with our colleagues in the neuromuscular world and the CNDR. I think we'll hear from them later here as well on that part of the project. So now I'm going to hand off to John, and then he'll hand back to me a bit later again.
Oh, thank you very much, Pranish, and thank you to Cohort for this opportunity. Both PKU and MPS in Canada found ourselves in a similar position, no existing registry. And so I'm doing double duty here, also representing my colleague and friend, Kim Angel from the Canadian MPS group. And we felt that it was important to try to develop a comprehensive registry that was independent of any specific drug or other therapy development. And we were, as Prentice said, we're part of the Syndern predecessor. And for both of our patient organizations, it's a long-term but a key goal. It's starting off as a pediatric registry, and as I like to say, tongue-in-cheek, if we don't harm them, it's pretty much a scientific certainty that the children will grow up and become adults. So we want it to be, that's another dimension to comprehensive. And the work product here that we seek is a Canadian PKU patient registry and a Canadian MPS patient registry. Next slide, please. We thought it important to try to identify key values underpinning our work together in developing these patient registries, and just briefly discuss the 6 key values of sustainability. It has to be able to last and go beyond the initial round of funding. It needs to be accessible. We did pretty much insist to our good friends at Nord about the redesign of their IamRare platform, that it needed to be bilingual in English and French, and preferably someday an evolution will continue to be multilingual for accessibility. The addition, we wanted to do it in such a way that it would be easy, not difficult for other patient groups and other groups of clinicians to use the same platform to develop their own specific disease kinds of registries. We felt to emphasize that we see this registry as a public good, not a private good, not a commercial good. And we wanted to make sure there were benefits, tangible benefits for patients and their families, and building capacity for research along with others in a collegial way. We thought that was really important, both on the patient side and the clinician side. And to turn it back to Prentice for the next slide.
Thanks, John. And for this slide, if we can just build it as I go, I'll tell you when to move to the next one. So the governance of this with so many important partners is something we've spent a fair bit of time and effort in trying to get right. And we've mentioned the patient organizations. There's also an academic hospital research institute as a main partner in setting up the Canadian metabolic patient registries. And as John's already mentioned, we were starting with 2 registries, one for PKU and one for MPS. And the Academic Hospital Research Institute will serve as a registry coordinating center and the data custodian. The organizations will work together to have a registry steering committee to oversee this. Now, if we go to the next slide, joining us will be a collaborative research and usage agreement. And if we go to the next slide, and we've already said that we're working with Nord as the registry platform. And so there will be a service agreement that will connect the registry coordinating center, in this case, the CHIO Research Institute, with Nord. Now, I think if you go to the next one, when we start collecting clinic data, I think this will be coming a bit later, we will need to have data sharing agreements that will be held between the registry coordinating center and the hospitals and clinics. And then maybe click again. Great, trying to remember the order in which these are coming. And, there will be multiple, and there are multiple funding partners in for this endeavor. And the funding generally can flow through the registry coordinating center or through the patient organizations, and there has to be agreements between all these core members. And then last click, please. And in terms of the information and the clinicians and the patients and families, obviously, the patients and families are the ones who will be consenting, and the consent management and the consent options that Pam noted, will be theirs to consent. And this we're showing in here, as well as with the clinicians who will also be part of that registry steering committee. So, when we were looking at this slide and we thought if we flashed it all up all at once, it would be a bit of a mess to try and understand, but this is actually showing the nodes and the agreements that need to be in place between them. So now if we go to the next slide. In terms of the participants, the recruitment will be through patient organizations, social media, and eventually through the metabolic clinics. The consent and assent process will be based on age, and really 3 major areas: enrolling and contributing data to the registry, to be contacted about related research, and options for sharing of their information. Right? So this is patient information in the registry and what are their wishes with that information. The eligibility criteria to start would be a confirmed diagnosis of one of the inherited metabolic diseases, again, to start PKU or an MPS. We're starting with pediatrics, so age 18 or under, and receiving disease-specific healthcare in Canada. Next slide. Okay, and so in terms of the data variable and collection, these are informed by the core outcome sets. This has been completed and published for PKU, and so if you look at that publication, you'll get a sense of what that involves and what that includes. And again, those were co-developed with patients and clinicians and academics. And that is also in development for MPS. The data collection will be patient and caregiver reported information for phase 1 and clinic and clinician contributed information for phase 2. The platform will be the Nord platform, hosted and stored on Canadian servers. And the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario Research Institute will be the data custodian. And John pointed out that people would want to know about time. So phase 1, so patient and caregiver reported information is summer 2022, and phase 2 for clinic reported information will be in 2023. I think this is where I hand it back to John for the last bit.
Okay. Thanks again. Just absolutely critical to this development was engagement with patients and families, and that has been a major focus and a major commitment for starting with the leadership of the research team, but added to that leadership is a big shout out to Maureen Smith, known to many people in the rare diseases communities of Canada, as the co-principal investigator specifically on patient engagement and for patient engagement. Thank you, Maureen, for everything you do. She's been really carrying a heavy load there and working closely. This is for all across all 3 diseases, the 3 exemplars of PKU, MPS, and SMA, and that's built to be. This is patient oriented and patient co-developed. We're using, there's a natural partnership with patient organizations for outreach to their membership and their even their non-members who are affected by a particular disease. So next slide, please. And messages, wrap up here, co-development and cooperation in partnership with the patients' organizations and the academic and clinical researchers. Registries that are going to respond to family and patient priorities, such as focusing not just on access, but on outcomes. In the little world of PKU, our first project will actually be comparing the effectiveness of 2 different medical formulas, 2 different kinds of medical formulas, as opposed to a drug, well, in the category we call nutraceuticals. The other thing I just want to mention is that the focus is on, for us, is on measuring outcomes longitudinally. That's really important. And we want to be completely respectful of confidentiality and privacy, and respectful of the Canadian values around it, and of course the Canadian laws. And we think this will be, we hope this will be a sterling example of co-partner development between clinicians, researchers, and patients, their families, and their organizations. And we look forward to going live in the summer of 2022. Thank you.
Was that a final thank you on behalf of the team?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That was brilliant. And it really did, as Pam said, give some real substance to what She presented in terms of the overview, gave us some really great examples in terms of how it's being used, and really great chats going on in terms of the opportunities. Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you and maybe to invite some feedback, and whether you want to start with the other people that were part of the team, or maybe go directly to Nicola and the other panelists we've got.
Thanks so much, Durhan. And I have a few questions jotted down and pulling from the chat, but I think we should give an opportunity to Nicola, Victoria, and John to weigh in with their questions. This is so exciting. This is a North American initiative. Nicola, what did you hear that you want to weigh in on from the Duchenne Canada perspective?
First of all, I want to commend the MPS group for their registry. It looks really exciting, and the setup of it looks really, really wonderful. And for so long we've sort of lived in this world of the silo-based data management and culture, where data is used or collected and used for a single purpose, and unfortunately that's not useful for us. And so the idea of creating these data hubs I find is really interesting, where you're bringing in information from different sources, the patient registry, the clinical registry, and eventually health records as well. They can all be combined to develop a platform of data collection that can have multiple uses. And as us for patients and the patient organizations, the usages that we're looking for are, ways that we can better understand, the standards of care that are being offered to patients, and inform, healthcare policies, looking at, natural history, and particularly, and I love that, that sort of co-development with the patients and the patients being at the center of that, because, looking at aspects of care like assistive devices, and also aspects like participation. That's a really important outcome to be collecting from a patient perspective, including those patient-reported outcomes. And then they also aid, right, in the clinical recruitment for clinical studies. But then as we developed or as therapies come on board, it's not a therapeutic specific registry, right? It doesn't matter what therapy it is. We still have the ability to collect that real world impact of different types of therapies that are coming in. And most importantly, it provides patients with that knowledge to advocate for themselves. Like the data that they can get from registries, it's power for them. It helps them advocate not only for their own healthcare, but it also helps the patient organizations advocate and participate in discussions with regulators and policymakers as well. I know there's a group in Europe that the Duchenne Data Foundation have been working very closely on registries, and they follow very similar sort of principles that I think that you've outlined for MPS. It's around those FAIR principles, right? So data collection, data management, it should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And also that the patients should be empowered to decide who has access to their data and when. And I see a lot of those elements in what you're doing with MPS. So thank you for that.
That's a great start, Nicola. Over to you, Victoria. What do you see that is happening from the IamRare platform, how it's being adapted and used by CHIO for what you're trying to do and accomplish? And then just as a heads up, I want to get to the question of how these platforms are going to help enable the Canadian rare disease drug strategy. But that might even be a question back to Durhan to actually bring it together. But over to you, Victoria, first.
Yeah, great. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak here. And so I come from the academic side, helping support the operations of the Canadian Neuromuscular Disease Registry for many years. We also have a corporate team that actually does build other registries, national registries in rare disease in Canada and elsewhere in the world. So we have multiple registries operating and built with both clinical reported and patient reported data. So I think, very important to me is and we do work, as you heard, with Inform Rare within our Canadian Neuromuscular Disease Registry on building out what we're sort of calling an evolution, I guess, of our neuromuscular disease registry, where we started in the clinic. It was sort of clinic focused, academic research focused. We've had, strong support from Defeat Duchenne Canada and ALS Canada and other, patient organizations over the years in helping support the growth of our programs. But largely, centered around a change in a therapeutic landscape where we have these high-cost drugs coming into Canada. The importance of understanding that natural history, of being able to leverage that data and bring in that patient voice, I think is the growth of the program, as well as enabling, you heard very briefly about registry-based trials, which is what we're doing in SMA with Inform Rare, to be able to increase the capacity and the rigor of that data collection so that it can form regulatory practice and really leverage those existing infrastructures. So I think it's just phenomenal, and really bringing in that patient perspective is something the Neuromuscular Disease Registry may not have done as well at outset. We worked with our patient organization partners, but we are now working through some of Inform Rare, building these patient research partner teams to actually bring that into our everyday work. And all of our programs we operate corporately, we've done the same. Patient research partners have helped build the program, test the program, build the governance, sit on that governance committee. And I think it's so important in that growth in being able to reuse the data broadly for all of our stakeholders.
That's excellent. Thanks so much. And I gave you a bit of a heads up, John, in terms of what we were looking for potentially, because cystic fibrosis has been, at the really at the coalface of a lot of the questions around access to medicines in Canada. And I know CF Canada and you have been running a patient. I mean, I don't have to tell you or the community that. Are there some lessons learned from what you've heard this morning, but also going back the many years that you've spent working on access to treatments that you can actually bring this together, patient registries and the national approaches towards access to medicines?
Thanks, Bill. This has been really interesting for me. As you alluded to, we've had a registry that this was started back in the 70s, and it actually built on a registry that was started in the States in the 60s. So it was fascinating for me to see the NORD approach to Inform Rare, the platform and the intentionality and everything that's sort of gone into thinking about how to build it, because ours has really sort of built up organically over the years. And so a lot of the elements there were very familiar to me, but weren't necessarily built into the system when it was initially conceived. And so I actually think this is really, really interesting. And we're at a stage now where we've been developing it, but obviously there's ongoing growth. And we're going to go back and I was not familiar with a lot of the information that was just shared here. And I'm going to be going back and looking at that. But certainly in terms of what one can do, the utility of this, you alluded to the use of a registry in advocacy, and that has just been incredibly valuable for this organization. When just recently, and you're probably aware of this, just recently a very important drug approved in Canada, but there were limits placed on prescribing. So certain clinical conditions placed on it because, the clinical trials actually looked at patients who were sort of mid-range in terms of the development of the organization. You can have people who are quite healthy, people who are very severely affected. And when you run the clinical trials, you tend to look at the median. You sometimes exclude people who are on the outside ranges. And for some bizarre reason, when the drug CADTH reviewed it and did their health technology assessment, they chose to reject a certain population and refuse them. And we were able to, on a dime, tell them, well, that's going to affect 27% of the population that is 12 and up, and 77% of the population that's 6 and up. And so, we were able to point out some of the flaws in that. So having this data on hand is just phenomenally valuable. And probably don't need to tell that or reinforce that to people who are on this call. The one thing I would just comment on, and maybe I missed it, maybe I didn't, was that I did not see, and that is it relates to the interoperability for under the FAIR principles, is the ability to connect with already existing health system databases. And here I'm thinking of ISIS, CIHI, provincial databases. And that's an aspect where, a patient registries are incredibly valuable, but there's also, you can't have everything in a patient registry. It's just not feasible. And so it's incredibly important and really valuable to be able to combine or connect with those established databases. And it's something that we're currently working on right now with a couple of governments.
Well, why don't we bring that back to Pamela and Pranesh and John? How does this connect with other databases, not just patient registries? And my new analogy for this is the International Space Station. Pamela, you've helped build something up there, and there's hopefully a Canadarm on there that Pranesh and John are helping build too. But let's make it useful so that we can all get up there. Pamela, how is this connected to potentially other registries or databases?
That's a really good question. And thank you, John, too, for bringing that up. So we've done some of that work in the States. What we are educating people on is this notion of linking them to an electronic health record being the holy grail, because people don't recognize that that isn't really the case, and that you can link it to, a Yale New Haven system for, close to our Connecticut offices as an example, but we need to pull from those systems, not use those systems necessarily as a direct point, because we don't know what, patients are all over the place, and they are really, central to that. In the case of Inform Rare, I think Pranesh and John mentioned, we are going to be linking those systems in phase 2. And they're known to the research collaboration that's taking place. We also, just to let you know, we are we have APIs. So for those who are on the more technical side, interfaces, to use a simple term, to other systems. So for example, NORD is engaged in a regulatory project in the States with FDA. It's called Rare Disease Cures Accelerator, DAP. And so we've developed an API for folks who are on NORD's IMRare system that want to contribute de-identified data into the DAP. We do that for them. So it's a service, that's free that we offer. So we know that that's important, and we have been chipping away at it, and we'll plan to do so, especially with our Inform Rare colleagues. Once we go live with phase 1, we're going to pivot to that.
That's fantastic. Pranesh and John, as you build the Canadarm, how do we make sure this is somehow interoperable with some of the EMRs and EHRs that are and other databases that exist out there?
I wanted to go to the second part of what you said and what John brought up in terms of linking to the administrative data sets. This is something that we paid a fair bit of attention to even during the Simdern years, the projects. We often think about the interventions and the therapies, but delivering those therapies and having access to them and the system impacts on whether or not optimal outcomes are achieved for people often depend on those system, I might call them system issues, but often, I have to admit, often system barriers, right? And understanding what some of those are. We did include the ability to consent to having information to be able to do analyses in the provinces who did have administrative data sets, such as ICES in Ontario, to understand what were some of the patterns of healthcare utilization, were patients being seen equitably in different areas, et cetera. And so some of our publications through those years, highlighted that kind of work, which I think is equally important to the input side, right? Is to be able to ensure that you can get that bigger snapshot of system level utilization, but really barriers, right? That's already part of work we've done and intend to continue doing, and the structures that I've shown will allow us to do that.
It's almost as if you've given a recipe for how to actually build a registry effectively. And you know, John and Pradesh, when you were presenting, all of the connections involved agreements for informed consent, right back, of course, to the patients, and really well done to actually do it with a couple of patient groups, not just, or therapeutic areas, not just PKU, but PKU and MPS. I don't know, Pamela, do you want to jump back in and comment on what you heard from John and Pradesh in terms of how they've used your platform in Canada, and are you know, is there any opportunity for other Canadians to do that based on what you've seen so far?
I actually think they have established a really great model. I mean, the first time I heard from them, and Kim and Beth, I just couldn't keep it within my skin, because I think this notion of bringing all the different stakeholders together in this collaborative way with patients and patient advocacy organizations at the center is really the long-term strategy that's going to be the most successful. Nicola, Victoria, and John also mentioned key characteristics that were really, really important. We've seen lots of different forms of work in the field of registries, and we don't like to criticize or minimize people who are starting with a smaller footprint than this, you know, because, you know, you can build. It's important to start. But the model that the Inform Rare team has put together is really brilliant for all the characteristics that you described. And it's very inclusive, and that's really important because you don't know in the future what opportunities will exist with these communities, with the data, and you don't want to build yourself into a box such that you can't evolve. And that's what I have seen a lot of happen, and like really surprisingly so. And that is not how they've approached the design and structure of the project and the work that they're planning to do.
Excellent. So we're going to see more like it. Durhan, just keeping an eye on the time too, where do you want to go next?
I think we are indeed just about out of time. I know that it's a bit hard when people need to drop off, and this really should have been a much, much longer session, but we are going to hopefully get everybody to come in when we're doing our June conference, be able to drill down on this a bit more, but also beyond this. You know, the brilliant thing about Canadians, as you've noted, Pam, is that we do things really well thought out, you know, look at all the principles, look at the design of it, and very inclusive, right? So this is good. I won't say the Americans are slap and dash, but what the Americans do is they get to the heart of it. You know, they see the urgency of it, they see the exigency of it. And I know when Nord started doing this and with the Centers of Excellence, it was like, it ain't going to be perfect necessarily, but hey, we can get it working, and we can kind of work through it with more as we're getting feedback. So I think somewhere in there is the perfect marriage. So I would really like to encourage, and I don't have a real working plan for this. And Victoria, I'm sure you see that as well, because you work on both a commercial side and working on the nonprofit support side. Though I think we're all talking about here is very much of a nonprofit. I think there's a future here for us to maybe bring back together the groups. Let's do that collaboration. Let's move forward. Obviously, as you know, all of you here, our big interest is how do we get this in place and get it start to be functional for our rare disease drug strategy? And can we do it on a pilot basis based on the diseases that might be coming forth and say, hey, we need to begin to develop a registry. We need to be able to put our patients into something. It's kind of what happened with the Fabry community way back when, you know, in Canada. We got a drug. The only way we're going to get it is we monitor the patient. So what do we need to set up? So I really look forward to the opportunity for us to kind of come back together, and really begging on Nord to provide as much support. I think that Nord is sort of like, you know, here we are. I mean, it's not exactly an Oliver Twist, but I kind of look at Nord as our rich uncle in the States, you know, that has all these resources and all these capabilities. And it's also so very benevolent, not a Fagin. You're right. It's the nice rich uncle that we can also, you know, kind of take advantage of. But I think, as you're saying, we can contribute so much as well in terms of the way that we work. So I think we have the opportunity to really move forward. And I think we need to build this in, you know, into our planning for this rare disease strategy, the rare disease drug strategy. And this has just been a brilliant start to it. So I just want to thank everybody who was here. We do have on Thursday, I know it's very quick turnaround, but we just don't have that much time between now and when we want to get going. And in terms of, getting the rare disease drug strategy up, we're going to have the Centers of Excellence. And I think you will see how this actually works within having centers that are also going to be able to house these registries and be part and parcel of it. So huge thanks to Beth, to Pranesh, to John Adams, certainly wonderful to have you back presenting with us, and to obviously to Nicola, Victoria, and to John Wallenberg for your contributions as always. So hopefully we'll see you on Thursday, and hopefully we'll see all of you, in Ottawa. Let us know, especially for the patients who want to come. We do have scholarships that we can provide to support, and we want to continue this discussion. So thank you again very much.
Thank you.